Hello, we're talking about creativity today. Back in 30 seconds to explain it all. See you soon. Hello, my name's Shamash, author of Mindfulness for Dummies, and we're talking about my favorite value, probably one of my favorite, if not the favorite, which is creativity. So, how can we be more creative now? Before we get into that, one of the things that can spark creativity is mistakes. Now, one of the things I've got on here is one of those green screens. You know, when you have a green screen and then it puts a background? So, normally I put the green screen up, but today I haven't. But I happen to have a painting that I've done of a yellow circle on a green background. And I think it's Rebecca. Someone said that, wow, that looks so cool. Look at that. Maybe a mistake, but it looks amazing. And so I had another idea. You ready for this? This is going to be cool. Da, 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 da. Creativity. It's amazing, isn't it? I love it. I should just stand up like this. Yeah. I'm the universe. And the universe. So, creativity. How can we be more creative? How can we get our creative juices flowing? Why is it important? And how does it link to being more peaceful, being more calm, practicing mindfulness? How do the two go together? Well, my first one links to the silliness that I'm doing right now. Is to My first tip is to be more creative, is to be what I'm calling small silly, which goes from reasonable to being radical. And I think that works because of being reasonable, being logical is following rules. And if we want to be if we want to be more creative, then we need to break the rules and we need to do something a little bit different. Otherwise, it's impossible to be creative. We need to do something differently. Why is it impossible to be creative if we're following the rules? Well, I think the whole definition of creativity, what it means to be creative, is to come up with different solutions, something new, something different. And everyone's been following the rules. Everyone's been reasonable and following stuff like that. And so those things have already been tried. So if you want to be creative, you want to try something new. Um, in terms of, I'm trying to think of an example in my own life, and I think it's probably me getting the opportunity to write the book Mindfulness for Dummies. I was not an author. Um, I didn't know much about these dummies series of books, but I literally just went to the website dummies.com, clicked on contact, and said, "Why isn't there a book called Mindfulness for Dummies?" And that ended up to leading to writing the book, and I had to be very creative to manage to write it as well. And then I ended up teaching this mindfulness stuff full time. So one thing can lead to another, and you need to do something little bit silly, something that doesn't make sense, and that can actually lead to creativity. So my first tip is to be silly, and I'm saying small silly because sometimes it's hard to get out of a rut. You're so used to doing things in a certain way that it's hard for you to do something different. And so do something small that's silly, like what I did here or here. Who knows what I did that will lead to, or just taking a different route, or walking backwards for 1 second, or standing upside down while you're doing your meditation. I don't know, just do something a little bit backwards, a little bit different. And it can only be, it may just take 5 or 10 seconds to do that slightly different thing, but it could lead to something interesting. So do something which is against what makes sense, what's reasonable, and it could lead to some more creative solutions. So that's why I say small silly. Second tip is, a lot of people say this, take breaks, but what does take a break mean? And I was just thinking about, what does it mean to actually take a break? Because if our brain is always on, it's not like it switches on here and now it switches off. Those neurons are constantly firing. But when we're doing work and we're working too hard, it stifles our creativity because of the part of our brain that triggers creativity and creates creative connections, the front part of our brain, becomes less active when we're working too much or if we're stressed. So we need to take breaks. But what does it mean to take breaks? It means to do something different. So, for example, if you're on your phone all the time, if you're on your computer all the time, when you take your break, you need to be away from those places, because if, otherwise you're just doing the same thing, you're continuing to do it. If your break is always to go for the same walk around the block, that's fine. But I think you'd probably get even more nourished and refreshed if you took a slightly different route. If you went around the other direction, or you took or maybe you cycled, or you called up a different friend. So I think sometimes doing the same thing in your break every time can also not nourish you so much. So think about how you could do something different in your breaks, and that might refresh you a little bit more, get out of that little rut, and get you thinking a bit more creatively. So that's my second tip, which is take breaks, and obviously mindfulness and meditation is another thing that you can do there. But also, I've noticed even with meditation, mindfulness, you can get into a bit of a rut too, and keep doing the same thing and not really get the full benefits that you could. And that's why I'm always thinking about, oh, what new meditation practices can I do? How can I practice differently? At the moment, I'm kind of practicing as I'm teaching every morning in the daily mindfulness club, and we do a different letter of the alphabet, and we have a different theme depending on the different letter. And right now, we're thinking about, okay, what will be the theme for November? And so you've got different themes, got different values, different meditation techniques, and that keeps it fresh too. And my final creativity tip, number 3, is use constraints. Now, this is an interesting one that not so many people know about, but I got this from one of my favorite books of all time called Creative Confidence. And the two authors are world leaders in creativity and bringing creativity into organizations. And they used to even consult Apple and work for Apple to help them to be more creative. And they say one of the keys to creativity is to put constraints in. If you've just got a blank sheet of paper and you've got infinite amount of time and infinite amount of money, then no creativity is required. But if you say you've got a certain amount of time, you've got a limited amount of money, then you need to start being more creative about thinking, how am I going to do this? Going back to the example of the first book that I wrote, the constraint was only having 4 months to write it, and it had to be done. Otherwise, the contract wouldn't work. And so I had that constraint. So I had to be as creative as possible to try and get it done in that time. And that's why, I mean, on one level, people hate deadlines. We don't like having deadlines. But on another level, we know that without deadlines, things just go on and on and on, and they never get completed. So we need to have some sort of constraint on our time to be able to get stuff done. The other thing is money. People seem to think, and this is a real limiting belief, I think, which is, yes, we need enough money to cover our basics of food, shelter, and clothing. But sometimes people feel that they need to have £1 million or hundreds of thousands of pounds to, let's say, start a business or to try a new project. But you can challenge yourself. Like, how could I start? There's a book called $100 Startup, which is how to start a new project or a business for just $100. And the book is full of ideas of people who've managed to do it. And so there's an example of a creative constraint. You only got $100. How would you start a project or a charity or a social enterprise or a business? And right now, that's so needed. We need as much creativity as possible to help people in this really tough time to get through it. So money can be used as a constraint. And we know so many examples of projects, especially in governments, but probably in corporates as well, where they have huge budgets to put a new IT system in, or let's say at the moment, consultants working with on the virus and trying to solve it, and trying to kind of impact the public in a positive way. And there's lots of articles about how money's being wasted and spending thousands of pounds a day on consultants, and they're not coming up with the right solutions. So having a financial constraint can really help. And then there can be other constraints as well. So it could be to do with materials. So let's say if you're doing a piece of artwork, you can just say, I'm just going to use one color, or I'm only going to use one canvas. Another bonus tip that I want to say for creativity is try to, rather than, this is a wonderful example, I think they gave in the Creative Confidence book. And they had two groups of people. One group of people, they said, okay, we want you to make a clay pot. We want you to mold the clay pot as beautifully as possible. And you've got 1 hour to do it. And the other group, they said, don't worry about the quality of the clay pot. Just try and mold as many clay pots as you can. Just keep doing it. Clay pot, clay pot, clay pot. Keep making them. And after the 1 hour, you can guess which one had the much more beautiful clay pots. And it was the one that were making loads of them, because they were being prolific. They weren't worrying about how good it was. They weren't being perfectionists. They just kept practicing. And so they got better and better at making these clay pots. Whereas the other group, where they just tried to be perfectionists with this one, were not really practicing that much, because they were just trying to create one clay pot. So let's say if you want to teach mindfulness, I know some people here are mindfulness teachers watching, rather than trying to build up to that one great guided mindfulness meditation you're going to share with others, guide a mindfulness meditation every day, or record one every day and share it with someone, or guide somebody in it. And so then you get daily practice in guiding a meditation. So then you're kind of being more prolific, and you're getting more experience, and you're learning from it. So they're my kind of main tips that come to mind. Be a bit silly, be a bit playful. This is my example of playfulness today. That's amazing. I wonder if I got that. Wow. I feel like going in, but you can't. Second one is to take breaks, to do something different in your breaks. If you just keep working, it's not going to work. And finally, use some constraints. So if you want to write a book, write 100 words a day, or write for 1 minute a day. And this is where the start small comes in. Use your constraints and start really, really small. If guiding of 10-minute meditation is too much for you, do 1 minute. If 1 minute guidance is too much for you, 30 seconds or 10 seconds. But small is really, really powerful, because it gets the momentum going. This principle is linked to a principle called Kaizen. Check it out. That's what I'm reading a lot of at the moment, which is fun. Awesome. I wish you a great day. We're coming towards the end of October now. It's a nice time to think about what small change you want to put into your life, what new habit you want to create. Let me know what theme you would like me to talk about in November. I'm open to ideas and creative ideas. I've been talking about a different value every day of this month of October. It's been fantastic. Part of World's Value Day and Values UK, I think it's called, and also of other organizations linked to values. But open to ideas, what you'd like me to teach or talk about, or guide. I could guide meditations too. What do you think would be what is most needed? And I'm happy to share. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I will see you tomorrow. Bye for now.